minding my own business when the tiger came upon me. Naturally, I was terrified.
Sound good?
Thanks, Ross.
Thanks, Ross.
What happened next, though? You can't leave us with that.
Well, I looked
happened
at
next?
he and he at me, and it went raw, and I shit my pants.
I suppose that's perfectly normal, you know. I mean, encountering a tiger in the wild.
No, just
like
now when I went raw, I shit my pants.
Oh.
It's a visual I'm getting out of my mind right now. Going to clear the mind, going to take a deep breath.
That was from these two guys. I think they were called Beyond the Fringe, and it was Peter Cook and Dudley Moore, and they would do these acts on stage, like non sequiturs, apropos of nothing. They cracked each other up, and they were a big deal in the 60s.
Okay.
So how are you?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm great, and I'm tickled to death, and maybe even honored that you would make time for this. I don't know how much Chuck told you, but your book, Breath, was the proximate cause of 1 week of abject misery, followed by 14 months of complete bliss. I got the septoplasty. My life has changed, and I don't think it would have happened without you, James.
Well, that's great to hear. I wish I could take credit for that, but it was all the good researchers and surgeons out there that are applying these techniques and bringing awareness to people about nasal breathing. We're not told anything about the difference between mouth breathing and nasal breathing, and that's a crime in and of itself.
I am newly converted and in violent agreement with you, but I will say that, you know, like so many other really, really important things, it seems like the conversation has existed for so long inside these verticals, right, where the choir preaches to each other. So, yeah, surgeons get it and certain doctors get it. But your book cut through a lot of that. You made it interesting. And so I want to talk to you about all of it. And I'm sure you're sick of telling some of these stories, but do you still feel like this is a mission-oriented thing? I mean, do you still believe that the information in Breath can fundamentally change the species?
I do, and I'm not sick of talking about this stuff. When I am, I won't talk about it. I really mean that. I'm so excited to continue talking about it because I keep hearing stories from people like you. People who had had sleep apnea or snoring for 20, 30 years. People who had chronic obstruction in their nasal cavities for allergies or for some other developmental problem, and they learned how to breathe properly and completely changed their lives. So I heard these when I was researching the book. Now I'm hearing them every single day from people all over the world. So that charges me up, makes me want to keep talking about it.
How can something so obvious have become something so oblique, so obtuse? How did we lose sight? This is the thing we do, 20,000 times a day. And so many of us are just doing it wrong.
I think that people, when they look at breathing, they just assume if you're breathing, you're okay, right? You're getting air in and out of your lungs. I'm breathing, I'm alive. When you're not breathing, that's really bad because you're unconscious or dead or something awful. But what people don't seem to appreciate, what I didn't appreciate until I got into this research, was it's how you're breathing that's so important. Just like how you eat. What kinds of, it's not just important that you're eating food. Are you eating food or not eating food? It's the kinds of foods you're eating and even the time of day in which you're eating those foods. It's the same thing with exercise. So I think for the past 100 years or so, that was how we thought about breathing, that, as long as you're breathing, you're okay. Nose, mouth, whatever, breathing 30, 40 times a minute, doesn't matter. It's just oxygen. You're bringing oxygen in, CO2 out. But as I learned, it's much more subtle than that. And our ancestors have known about this stuff literally for thousands and thousands of years.
That was the thing that really sucked me into your book. When you started, not really with an examination of the way our noses look vis-a-vis the way we breathe, but with the way our teeth look.
Yeah, when anthropologists first told me that one of the reasons we're breathing so poorly is because our airways have changed, and they've changed just over the past 100, 200, 300 years, I said, well, that's not how evolution works, right? Evolution takes tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years to work. And they said, well, if you don't believe me, come on out here and we'll show you human skulls from 200 years ago, 100 years ago, and we'll show you modern human skulls. So I did that. And I looked at hundreds and hundreds of skulls. And if you look at a skull from a society that was eating pre-industrial food, all those skulls have straight teeth and they have a prognathic face. Okay, every single one of them. All of our ancestors had straight teeth, all of them. If you look at modern humans today, 90% of us have some crookedness or deformation in our mouths. So if people don't believe this, if they think it's some crazy hypothesis, look at an old skull and then look in the mirror. And you start asking yourself questions where, how the hell did this happen?
Yeah.
And how is it affecting us in so many ways?
So how did it devolve? How did the holes up here in our sinuses get smaller?
You can pinpoint the exact moment when our teeth went to hell. And it's the exact moment when cultures adopted industrialized foods. This is not me on some soapbox against industrialized foods. It is a researcher going into this world and seeing anthropologists and other researchers and scientists who have documented this for the last 100 years. The moment a culture gets industrialized food, within the first generation, their kids' teeth are crooked. After that, about 70% of the population has crooked teeth. After that, 80%. After that, look around. That's us now. And 90% of us have crooked teeth.
Can you define industrialized food?
Sure.
For us?
So
or for me, I should
industrialized
say.
food, of course. So if you look at the food that all of our ancestors ate, especially hunter-gatherers, look at what they're eating. They're eating meat. They're cooking it most of the time. They're eating roots, berries, all that stuff. And then you start looking at food of early farming cultures, and it's still pretty whole, right? It's whole, natural foods. And then you look at industrialization, especially the Industrial Revolution. We got really good at putting stuff in jars, putting stuff in cans, pulverizing wheat, of ripping the germ and the bran off of rice. So you just have polished white rice. And the moment that happened, our teeth went to hell. And we also had a ton of different health issues, like rickets started taking over England. It was called the English disease. It was so prevalent. So yeah, again, this is not a hypothesis. This is, you can document this, and people have done that.
So our food leads to a dental sort of calamity. And did that longening of the face, was that brought about ultimately by the food, or did that lead to the shrinking of the airways that just further exacerbated the problem?
So smaller mouth, smaller airway. And what happens with the mouth when the airway and the face don't grow properly, the upper palate of your mouth there tends to grow up instead of out. And an amazing thing looking at these ancient skulls, they have these huge upper palates and they're all flat. If you look at the majority of modern humans today, that upper palate grows up. When it grows up, it can impede the airflow in the nose. So it takes away real estate from the nasal cavities. Along with that, with this smaller mouth, you have less room at the back of the mouth. And this is one of the reasons why so many people snore and have sleep apnea. So the reason that this all happened, it's not just because of the food, even though that's the primary driver. Soft processed foods didn't have enough nutrients in them, but mostly they did not require hard mastication, chewing, especially in our early years. Without that constant chewing, the faces don't grow properly. That's what happened.
So it's almost like we stopped exercising our mouths, and all of the atrophy that you would expect to follow that kind of neglect, like any other muscle, it was inevitable.
Yeah. Great summary there. I should have just said that, but that's exactly what happened. And the thing is, this is very important when you're younger, but it's also important when you're older. I mean, go to a gym and everyone's working out every little micro muscle of their body, but no one's paying attention to the muscle and all the cartilage and the tissues that deliver energy for you to work out, and that's the mouth. And there are exercises for the mouth that have been shown to significantly decrease snoring and sleep apnea because you're toning that muscle, you're toning that airway. And and these have been around for decades, and people just don't seem to have gotten the message.
Well, I'm leaning in right now because I know a few 100,000 of our listeners are leaning in, and they're screaming two words: do tell.